Do you find yourself stuck in repeated patterns of thinking? Do you ever say to yourself, I wish I could get out of my head? Well, you need to see this. Hello, I am Naomi Light. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am a life coach and NLP practitioner, and I specialize in adaptability, the ability to adapt to the future that you want to have. In this episode, I am conducting an interview with Liz Oliver. Liz is a learning and development specialist, and she particularly deals with change management. She's written a book called The Change Equation, and I asked Liz lots of questions about how we as humans can change and evolve into more of the person that we want to become. Liz is absolutely full of fantastic fresh insights, and I know you are going to get loads from this interview. The very last question that I ask Liz is, what is the change equation? Her whole book has been written around this one simple formula called the change equation. And she shares all of that with us at the end. So you will want to stay right the way through. Make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you will always see when new episodes are out. And I really hope that this helps you to become the best version of you that there is. So, Liz, I have been asked a number of times by followers, people who watch these videos, and they say something along the lines of, I just find myself going around the same loops in my head. I'm stuck in my head. I have the same circular arguments, conversations, and I just don't know how to get out. How do you suggest that we get out of our heads?
Oof, that's a good question. And I'm not going to totally avoid the question, but I'm going to say that what would be great is to have an additional question to that one, which is not only how do we get out of our heads, but how do we actually make our heads a better environment to be in? In other words, with that incessant thinking, sometimes we say we want to stop it, but it's actually really difficult to stop those thoughts there, because it's just like you say, on a hamster wheel. So the more important point is, how do we make our heads a more pleasant environment to be in? So that's particularly what I would like to focus on, if that's okay.
Yeah. So the quality of the thoughts that are going around my head, not necessarily just emptying my head of the thoughts, but changing the quality. Is that actually possible?
Of course it is. Lots of people have done it before. So I think, there's a number of things. And really, to begin with, it's about being aware of what the quality and the content of these thoughts are. And then thinking about, well, how do we understand where it's coming from? So it's being a little bit of a detective, really, and starting to look at, well, what are these thoughts doing? Rather than it just being habitual, which it is, what's underneath them? What's driving those thoughts? And a lot of the time, when we really look underneath and look at what's driving our thoughts, we realize that a lot of it is really about our brain just trying to solve problems. It's trying to work something out. And so the incessant worries, especially around the unknown, especially around things that we haven't worked out yet, is just our brain, our intelligence trying to figure out, well, what do I do now? And I think it's important to recognize that intelligence that we have in trying to solve problems is only one aspect of the intelligence that's available to us. One way that I like to think about this is like having a four-wheel drive car, because we've got four different kinds of intelligence. We've got the intelligence of our physical body. We've got our intellect, of course. We've got our emotional intelligence, and we've got our spiritual intelligence. So I can talk about those in a little bit more detail, but just conceptually, if you imagine that most of us, if we're constantly thinking, what do I do? What do I do? What's next? How do I sort this? What do I, blah, 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 the kind of intellectual stuff. It's like driving on one wheel. And let's say most of us have got a two-wheel drive car, and that's fine when the environment is easy, when the driving conditions are quite calm. Then we can get away with using two of our intelligences, if you like, or having two wheels in drive. But when the environment is tough, when it's quite slippy and slidey and it's just a little bit uncertain, then we really need to engage all four of those wheels. We need to get all four of our intelligences operating together to help us through that tough territory. Is that making sense so far?
Complete sense. And I just love the analogy. I was kind of in my head, I was imagining a car with only one wheel spinning, going around in circles, which is, of course, the question. I keep going around with the same old things. But I love that the key to this isn't necessarily in thinking differently, but just in differently using your intelligence. And I would love to hear more from you about those four areas, and particularly what does that actually look like? Because some of these are a bit woolly concepts. So I don't know if you've got any specific examples from the four areas.
Well, sure, I'll do my best. So we'll start off with the physical body. And I mean, we all know that the intelligence of the physical body is absolutely extraordinary. We know that not only our ability to heal from stuff and to be able to act unconsciously. What I mean by that is things like driving a car unconsciously. That intelligence that's in the body that enables that is just extraordinary. And we've also got neural networks all around the body. It's not just in our brain. We've got that neural network in our gut, and we all know about gut feel, and that's part of the intelligence of the physical body. And when we learn to do a new physical skill, for example, whether we learn to dance or play a musical instrument, again, we're engaging some of that physical intelligence. So in order to get out of your head, for example, doing something really physically engaging or that's very sensory rich, for example, that really gets us engaged in that physicality. So whether it is listening to music, playing music, doing exercise, any of that kind of stuff really engages our body and really brings the physical intelligence, brings that wheel into drive, if you like. So that's the PQ aspect of it. The intellect, we've talked about that, and we probably don't need to say overly much more about that because I think we all understand that. We know where that comes from. The next one, of course, is EQ. The next Q, if you like, four of them, is our emotional intelligence. And again, if many people who are in personal development interested in this kind of stuff will know a lot already about emotional intelligence. And there's, again, a big neural network in the heart. Often as well, what happens is the heart feels things even before the brain does. And there's a lot of connection, obviously, between the heart intelligence, all the kind of neurons in the heart and the brain. And so when we think about our emotional intelligence, it's not only dealing with our own emotional stuff, managing it, being aware of it, it's also engaging in relationship with other people, having empathy and understanding of other people's emotional stuff. So often, and particularly when our emotions are unpleasant, when our emotions are uncomfortable, we tend to distract ourselves. And we distract ourselves by just doing something different and not really engaging that intelligence by allowing that emotion to move through in its own way. And I like to see our emotional intelligence a bit like a wave, and like a sea, and that if we allow it to rise and we experience it fully, then it tends to just fall of its own account. But if we stop it, it's like putting a dam in the river. And so there's going to be a buildup, and it's not very useful for us. So it's nice to think about our emotional intelligence that just rises and falls and rises and falls. And as long as we can stick with it, as long as we can express it when it comes, it usually just dissipates in its own time.
Yes, I absolutely love this. And I think that point you've just made about the wave is so crucial. And if we could just understand that and actually live that out, I think that would resolve so much of our stuck problems as human beings, or our, resistance. And I just wondered whether, really practically, especially if somebody's afraid of their emotions, because it can be so scary to face anger or sadness or fear and not know if you'll come out the other side, think, am I losing my mind? Am I sliding into depression? What's going on with me? Help. What do you do if perhaps you're sensing I'm stuck emotionally, it's my EQ, How do I move through that wave?
Well, other than going and seeing somebody that can help you with that, which of course is a useful idea, this is where the connection between EQ and PQ really comes into its own. Because we talk about these four intelligences, the four wheels of the car. I'm explaining them separately, but of course they're all part of the same system, if you like. So the emotional intelligence and the physical really work hand in hand together. So it's building awareness of when that feeling is there, whatever feeling it is, if it's anger or worry, whatever it is, as just really recognizing where is that in my body? How does it feel in my body? And allowing it and just to be there. Because again, there's a tendency to want to distract ourselves because it's not pleasant sitting with that physical discomfort, which it is, as well as emotional discomfort. But by giving it the space, by giving yourself the space and giving it a bit of attention, and as I say, if you can just almost breathe through it, I know it sounds a bit of a sort of therapy thing to do, but it does actually help. It does make a difference.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. So I'm hearing, give yourself space, give yourself attention, and locate the emotion in your body if you can.
Yeah.
And then maybe some breathing exercises, some slowing exercises to, I guess, to like really value the emotions as a part of you and as a valid experience, and to give them the TLC that they're due.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so we were on to spiritual intelligence. Talk to me about that.
Sure. So I think with spiritual intelligence, again, the word spiritual has got all sorts of connotations, and everyone's got their own idea about what the word spiritual means. I like to keep things very, very simple. For me, what spiritual intelligence is an awareness that we're part of a bigger system, if you like. Think about the other three intelligences: physical, the intellect, and the emotional intelligence are all actually contained within the body. The gut brain, if you like, the heart brain, the head brain, they're all in the body. But this thing called spiritual intelligence is almost beyond that. It's like, what's the system that we're part of? And all of us have some kind of awareness that we're part of something bigger than us. That could be as simple as a family system, but usually we're aware of something much bigger than that. We're aware of our part in an ecosystem or humanity or something even bigger than that. But notwithstanding everybody's different beliefs about what sort of system you're part of, just keeping it as simple as that really helps. So what spiritual intelligence is, it takes us away from me. Because often what happens in our thinking is all trying to sort out small problems that are really about self. How do I fix this? How do I do this? What if? What happens when? Whereas when you engage in your spiritual intelligence, you're taking your attention bigger, wider than that. And that in itself can just help to take you out of your smaller scale concerns.
Yeah, that is just, I've got light bulbs going on in my head as you say all of that. I think that is so helpful. And I think what you've just done is to permission people, because what I hear a lot from the clients I work with, the people that I serve, is that we all really know, there's more to life than what we can see. We've kind of sorted that one out ages ago, but I suppose the fear of being woo-woo, or the fear of kind of being dismissed by our culture that is very, like you've said, very kind of intellect focused, means that we sort of maybe repress it a bit or devalue it or whatever. And I think you've just given permission for us to say, no, for your own good, for your own growth, for your own enlarging as a person, you need to develop whatever that looks like for you, your spiritual intelligence, so that you can rise. The analogies are all like, take the high road, be the bigger person. The analogies are all pointing us to that kind of the largeness of the system that we're part of, and how we need to draw from that.
Yeah, exactly. And yet it doesn't need, like you say, it doesn't need to be woo-woo. I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that we're part of a bigger system. I think it's fair that we get it, right? Yeah. But what I was going to say is we don't need to sit cross-legged on a cushion with an incense stick to be part of this system, to engage in that, to engage in your spiritual intelligence. Even having a bigger purpose about being helpful to the community, that kind of thing. I mean, it's very simple, but yet that is one example, a smaller scale example of engaging in this spiritual intelligence, of doing your bit for something bigger than just you.
So Liz, you talk a lot about change and about how all of this together, this kind of a holistic understanding of us as human beings can equip us to change. Talk to me about what you mean by that. What kind of changes have you seen, or in your life, have people been able to achieve through paying attention to these things?
Oh, I mean, I think all sorts of things, from just changing simple behaviors to some really, really deep-seated stuff around just changing people's sort of sense of who they are and what their life's about. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone knows the logical levels of change model by Robert Dilts. It comes from the field of NLP, but it's quite useful. It's just a useful reference if you want to look that up. It talks about the different levels, not surprisingly, that change can happen on, from just changing behavior all the way down to changing a sense of identity and purpose. And I think what often happens is that we start on the level of behavior. So in other words, there's a sense of, right, I want to be different. I want to do something different. So you say, right, I'm going to start an exercise regime. And if you only start at that level of behavior, trying to just do something different, often it tends not to be very sustainable. We tend not to stick to it for very long. It's not until we go down some of the deeper levels, which go to skills, capabilities, it goes to beliefs, to values, and as I say, underneath at the core, to identity and purpose. And so I think if you want to make really lasting change, it's really important to go as deep down as you can go, depending on your level of awareness and where you're at in your life. But the deeper, the better, because the deeper you go, the more sustainable the change tends to be.
Oh, that is great. The deeper you go, the more sustainable the change tends to be, because we've all had that experience. And, I mean, I'm glad you picked exercise, because diet and exercise is often ones that I encounter where we have a great resolve, and we have a great strategy and we put it in place and we're doing great. We're running or going to the gym, or we're, on a Mediterranean diet or whatever it is. And then we hit a hurdle and we revert. And then potentially we also feel a lot of shame and guilt about that and don't attempt something again. And so, you can see how when we only bring change at the sort of intellectual level or at the behavior level, it is short term.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got a personal example around that thing, which is around exercise, which is, I've been quite disciplined in maintaining an exercise regime for a lot of my life when I've been able to. And more recently, something just hit me very, very deeply down. And it was when I got to a point of, what is my purpose? What am I here to do? And I realized that what I'm here to do is some of what I'm doing now. In other words, just to help people make change. And I felt it deep in my body. I felt this sense of purpose. And when I felt that purpose and felt, for me, what was really important about that, it became like a duty for me to take care of this body that's going to do this duty, if you like. If I don't look after me, my body, my physicalness, then I'm not going to be able to fulfill my purpose. So the desire and the need to do exercise came from a really deep level of, I cannot do my purpose. I cannot fulfill my purpose unless I look after myself.
Yeah.
And now it's like, it's so easy to do because as I say, because it came from such a deep level. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're, rather than just acting like somebody who looks after their body, you are actually feeling like somebody who looks after their body. You're being somebody who looks after their body. And then almost the strategy doesn't matter. The natural unfolding of that will be exercise or movement or whatever. And that might change, but your core identity will always produce those behaviors and thoughts and feelings of being somebody who exercises, somebody who moves their body.
That's it. Yeah.
That's so brilliant. And I can really relate to that. My own sense of purpose, being the most motivational level I can get to in terms of my psyche. Yeah. So you've written a book about change, which I was going to say, actually, I will link to the DILT's levels of change in the notes, and also I will link to your website where there are some resources and a little interview about the book.
That's right. There's a little, just an introduction. The video is maybe 6 minutes long on the homepage of my website. Again, I can share the link to that. So the book I've written is called The Change Equation. And the change equation is really just what are these essential human factors that help us to master our relationship with change. So perhaps it isn't the right time right now to go into all of the ins and outs of that and what the equation is, unless you want me to, or I can ... leave you to look at the resources and find that out for yourselves.
No, I think you should absolutely tell us, give us the kind of like 2-minute summary of what's the equation and what does it stand for?
Okay, so the equation is E equals 4Q minus R. So what are the components there? So E is about engagement. What that means is in order for us to follow through with change, we have to be engaged in it. Yeah. With that, it gives us energy, it gives us enthusiasm to make sure that we follow through. And that involves the 4Q minus R, okay? So I've already talked about the 4Qs. It's about engaging each of those 4 wheels, those 4 intelligences in what you're doing. Taking away R, the R stands for resistance, and there's a whole load of information there in the book about all the causes of resistance. What are the most common things that kind of get in our way when it comes to trying to make change? So I don't know if that's 2 minutes. But
that is perfect. And Liz, I've read your book, and so I can verify that it is packed full of all this kind of practical information. And I do think the piece on resistance is huge, particularly when you talk about how that shows up in our bodies and, you know, what we can do about the resistance. And so I really recommend and endorse your book. I think everybody, because we all need to change. I mean, now so more than ever, it's critical that we get a handle on how we can motivate ourselves, how we can engage with the challenges in our life and apply that incredible potential, the incredible intelligence we have in all the different ways inside of us to the challenges that are facing us. And I do really think your book has got an important message that we need to get a hold of. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing all of that, helping us to get out of our heads. And I will share the links to further insights and further information from you. Just one last question, Liz. I didn't prepare you for this, but is there anything that you are reading or looking at? Do you have a resource, a book that is really helping you at the moment as a person to grow?
The truth of that is no, not at the moment. I have read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of personal development books. I've been on this journey for nearly 30 years. And right now, or certainly over recent months, what I've realized is that, just as I've explained in the interview, that so much of our intelligence is already within. And sometimes it helps me just to tune into that rather than to listen to what other people have got to say. Doesn't mean to say I'm still not open to what is out there and all the fantastic resources that are there. But for now, I'm just tuning into my own intelligence.
I love that. And that's like such a perfect example of really your message. Put the book down and just listen to yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. I've got to live it. If I didn't live it, there'd be something a bit wrong there, right?
Absolutely. You've got to smoke what you're selling. Brilliant. So thank you, Liz. That's been fantastic.
Not at all. Thank you so much for inviting me.